Welcome back. You're still watching Network Africa on Channels Television. Now to some news that's bittersweet. Over 280 former child soldiers who returned to their families in Pibor, South Sudan, have started taking part in educational and social programs to help them settle back into their communities. Several militias have been fighting the government since South Sudan won independence in 2011 after decades of war with Khartoum.
After being away from the place which they once called home for so long, these children have now started taking part in a reintegration program that is teaching them skills and offers various educational, leisure and social activities. Based on the traumatic experience which they endured, they also receive counseling. The United Nations estimates that 13,000 children are associated with armed forces and groups throughout South Sudan, and that both warring parties in the current conflict have engaged in the recruitment of child soldiers since the fighting began in December 2013 between soldiers allied to President Salva Kiir and those loyal to his former deputy, Riek Machar. The demobilization is taking place after an agreement was made by David Yao Yao, the current county commissioner who was once the head of the Kober faction, a militia group in South Sudan that the children served in. The demobilization program has been ongoing since January, with the latest group of 283 children rejoining their families last month. The newest group is part of 1,757 former child soldiers who have been demobilized since the start of the year. According to the UN, some of the child soldiers have been fighting for up to 4 years, and many have never attended school.
At the end of this process, we will have worked with up between 2,000 and 3,000 children being released from armed groups. They're still identifying children in some areas, so the figures are not complete. And of the 1,300 children released so far, the vast majority of those have returned home to their families. A significant number of them have started to attend school, although there were challenges in resources in education in Greater Pibor. But things are progressing. The challenge now is for us to sustain it.
The UN Special Representative for South Sudan, Margaret was recently in Pibor to meet some of the former child soldiers and urged the release of those being held by militia groups in the region.
We continue to have focus on ensuring that these children are given the opportunity to get a better future for themselves, and that a Greater Pibor area then can be a model for the whole of South Sudan, that children do not belong with guns in their hands.
South Sudan is one of 7 countries where UNICEF is campaigning to end the recruitment of children as soldiers, following a government commitment in 2009 to stop using children as fighters.
For more on that, Tom Gillespie, who is the Director of Strategic Partnership for Peace Direct, joins us via Skype from London. Tom, thank you very much for speaking with us again on the program.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me start by asking you, based on your experience with this kind of thing as regards child soldiers, how are these children treated? I mean, how are they brought into that area of being, how are they made to become child soldiers?
It depends. Every context is different. I mean, some child soldiers do actually join armed groups voluntarily because they see that as preferable to their life with their families, which may be highly impoverished. They may even be sent to join the militia by the families themselves, who perhaps agree with what the armed group are offering. But unfortunately, in the vast majority of cases, the reasons for child soldiers joining groups are often around abduction, or they feel threatened to join the armed groups, or there are socio-economic pressures that force them into it.
Now, what is it in those cases, Tom? Do we actually see rescue take place, or are they set free eventually, like what we're seeing in South Sudan? How can we say this took place? Were they rescued or were they set free?
In this particular context, I'm not sure. You often get negotiations with armed groups who prefer to release the child soldiers for various reasons. Children often will escape of their own accord, so you tend to get smaller numbers coming in drips and drabs into recovery centres, or you have a large-scale operation which may release the child soldiers either militarily or through some kind of political or military pressure.
Now, the part that we're most interested in, Tom, is the issue of reintegration, like what we've seen in South Sudan. It's a bit bittersweet, but what's the process like, getting them back to the place that they once called home?
It depends. Some are quite informal processes where the children will make their own way back to their families or back to their communities, but often if it's a well-organised and well-supported process, then generally speaking they would be taken to some kind of central camp where they'll be given food and checked over for their health, and then they'll be processed, they'll be identified, and then they'll be tried to be reconnected with their families. Often the issue there is that when they return to their families, some of the outstanding problems that caused them to join the militia in the first place are still there. So if they were abducted, is there security to protect them and stop them from being abducted in the future? If there were socioeconomic pressures causing them to join, have those socioeconomic pressures been resolved, or is there likely to be further pressure for them to join such activities again? So the reintegration process needs to be accompanied by longer-term support, and that is support not just for the children but for their families. Often the children, if they've been away for a long time, can be seen by their families as a burden because it's another mouth to feed in an impoverished household. So we need to be careful that we understand not just the context of the child, but the context of the family and the wider community to ensure that this is sustainable reintegration.
Well, Tom, as always, it's been lovely having you join us. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you.
Well, Tom Gillespie is the Director of Strategic Partnerships with Peace Direct in London. We'll take another break now on the program. When we come back, we'll look at more developments in South Sudan. Please stay with us.